Good day everyone, Grimmels here with another video, and today I want to take a quick early look at Fog of War, a WW2 shooter that goes more in the realism direction and recently came out in early access on Steam. I saw the pre-alpha version of the game on Luftangreifer and Fly's channel a few days before it was released on Steam, and being an old fan of games like that, I was sufficiently intrigued by what I saw to give it a try myself. It's currently €11 on Steam. After all, I like games like this that have a bit of an Red Orchestra vibe to it. And after having played a few hours of the early access version now and having, despite the early version of the game, quite a bit of fun with it. There are still quite a few bugs and issues, but I also had some great atmospheric moments when playing Fog of War, so I figured I also make a video on it and introduce the game a bit and give some feedback on the current version. So let's take a look at the game. Now, as I said, Fog of War is a multiplayer first-person shooter that is set in World War II on the Eastern Front, and goes for a bit more of a realistic approach compared to, say, the Battlefield series. Fog of War is meant to feature large battles with team sizes of up to 50 versus 50, at least that is planned. That is, however, one of the critique points at the moment, since at the moment the netcode still needs a bit of work and the servers can't yet handle that many players. I have so far mostly played with 30 to 40 players on a server, since more than that currently leads to high ping and lag. However, the developers are quite active with the patches and have so far released a new patch every day, and there are already massive improvements to the netcode and the servers in those few days I have played, and to how many players can play on a server, so I hope we will get the promised 50 versus 50 battles eventually. With the maps being pretty big, a large number of players does make a large difference in getting those atmospheric war movie-like large battles. So let's take a closer look at the game and how it plays at the moment. Now currently there is one game mode, which is a pretty standard assault kind of game mode, with one team defending a location and the other team attacking it and having to take it over. If the attackers manage to do that, the defenders get pushed back to the next location and have to defend that objective, and so on. As far as I understand it, there are more game modes planned later down the line, but for now we have this assault-like game mode. As far as the units the players can control, there are two main groups in the game. The infantry company with all the infantry platoons and classes, like rifleman, machine gunner, anti-tank rifleman and so on, and the support company with the heavy equipment. That would be anti-tank guns, trucks which can tow the anti-tank guns and ferry soldiers around, mortars and light tanks. At the moment the tanks are a Panzer II for the Germans and the PT-7 for the Soviet Union. I'm not sure if heavier tanks are planned later down the line. Now, the support company units are all focused on needing team play to work. For all of those heavier units, the mortars, tanks and anti-tank guns, you need two players to use them properly. For example, a gunner/commander and a driver for the light tanks. They will also have to communicate well. The game does have in-game voice over IP, since it is pretty difficult, for example, to see out of a tank, and almost impossible to hit anything on the move. So the gunner will have to tell the driver to stop when he wants to fire, and since in those small light tanks the gunner is also the commander, you have to, when you're not using the gun, keep a lookout for enemy troops around you via the vision blocks of the commander's cupola, so nobody sneaks up on you with an anti-tank grenade, for example, and when somebody does, you of course have to tell the driver to move. The tanks come with high explosive and armor-piercing ammo, as well as a coaxial machine gun. I hope we will eventually get bigger tanks like the Panzer IV and T-34 with a 3-man crew as well, where we have a dedicated commander to keep an eye on things. That would be very interesting in my opinion, though would also require some more expensive anti-tank weapons to counter, maybe in the form of a Panzerschreck or bazooka, while at the moment we only have anti-tank rifles for the infantry company, as well as light anti-tank guns 37 and 45mm in the support company, but those, while working fine versus light tanks, would also have trouble with heavier tanks. Now, the developers also did a decent job on making it easier to find a gunner for your tank or mortar when you spawn in such a unit. Your team gets a message saying you are looking for a second person, and you just press 7 if you have the necessary points to join that slot. The tank interior is a bit simplistic compared to, say, Red Orchestra. Again, maybe we see some improvements here, but it works for now. Now let's look at how the spawn system works. There are of course limited slots available for the different classes and units, so you can't just have everybody as a machine gunner or in a tank. Infantry platoon can have a maximum of 12 riflemen but only 2 machine gunners, for example, and there are 3 infantry platoons. That is similar to other World War II first-person shooter games out there. And the different classes and units have different point costs associated with them, so a machine gunner is more expensive than a normal rifleman or an anti-tank gunner, with getting a tank being, not surprisingly, the most expensive slot at the moment. You earn points as you would expect by doing well on the battlefield. That kind of a point system I always liked, in comparison to, for example, the traditional battlefield style system, where you have tanks and the like just standing around and whoever is the fastest in clicking on them gets to drive them. With the point cost system, you can decide if you want to focus more on an infantry role, always taking the best infantry class you can get with machine guns and the like, or if you want to save up, for example, for a tank, but using less advanced infantry weapons. Also, with this going for a bit of a more realistic approach, you simply will have weapons that are better than others, and the points required to use them are a good way to balance this out a bit. Well, let's talk a bit about some of the infantry classes you have access to in the infantry company and what they do. Now, the cheapest infantry unit you can get is the standard rifleman with a bolt-action rifle and 2 hand grenades. If you for some reason don't even have enough points for a rifleman, you can spawn as a cook, which gets you a bolt-action rifle but no grenades. Both companies, the infantry and the support company, have one slot for the company commander, which has a submachine gun, a binocular, and grenades and smoke grenade as equipment. But the important thing about the company commander is that they get a command truck, which can be turned into a forward operating base, which acts as a spawn point for the whole company. Having that close to the objective is of course extremely important to keep their reinforcement times down. After all, the maps are very big in Fog of War, and the standard spawn point can often be a kilometer or more away from the objective for the attackers if they push the defenders back a bit. So finding a good spot for that forward operating base is important. You also have to be careful though to hide it well, since the enemy team will try to destroy it if they can find it. Or even worse, if the forward operating base is in the open, the enemy might be able to fire on it from its defensive positions. When I'm the company commander, I try to set it up a bit to the side of the objective, in order for my troops to be able to attack from another direction than directly from the front, where it is expected. Now, the next unit you can pick after the company commander in the infantry company tab is the platoon commander slot, one for each of the 3 platoons in the company, and the platoon commander comes with a semi-automatic rifle, a G43 or a SVT40, which is a nice firepower upgrade over the standard bolt-action rifle. He also gets binoculars and smoke grenades, as well as the ability to issue orders to the platoon to help coordinate. The platoon commander can be very useful in a team. The smoke grenades the platoon as well as the company commander have access to make it a lot easier to attack well-entrenched enemy units, and the binoculars help to identify troops at longer distances. Keeping enemy and friendly troops apart can be difficult at longer ranges, especially in twilight when the sun is lower. In that case, it is really helpful to have a guy with binoculars to make sure who you see at long distances. Also quite useful for machine gunners to spot and identify targets at longer ranges. Now, as mentioned, the semi-automatic rifles gives the platoon commander a nice amount of firepower himself, especially at longer ranges. As with the rifleman's bolt-action rifle though, you have to be careful in buildings. The game takes the length of the weapon into account, so if you are close to a wall, for example inside a building, you might not be able to point your rifle at the target. One of the reasons why shorter submachine guns do much better in build-up areas. Now, the next slot you can use is the machine gunner, 2 of those per platoon, and he is equipped with a MG42 for the Germans, which gets a 50-shot belt in the typical LNG drum, and a Dekturev TB machine gun for the Russians with a 40-round drum magazine. Those weapons, as well as the anti-tank rifles of the anti-tank rifleman, are meant to be used from the bipod, so in-game, while you can fire them standing up, you can't use the sights doing so. You need to go prone to use the sights or support the weapon in the window of a house, for example. So while the light machine guns are very powerful weapons, you often need a bit of time to get ready to fire. You can hipfire, spray and pray at short ranges, but you will have trouble hitting the broadside of a barn that way. Even using the sights firing prone, the light machine guns which are firing from an open bolt are not very accurate, but of course make up for that with a higher volume of fire. At up to medium ranges they are quite deadly, but at longer ranges the light machine guns in Fog of War are more for suppression, with the guns not being quite accurate enough to precisely engage single soldiers. Anti-tank rifles, as mentioned, are also fired from the bipod, like the light machine guns. The heavy anti-tank rifles are primarily meant to be used versus light tanks we have in the game, but can also be used as heavy anti-material rifles or makeshift snipers, though they lack the optics of real sniper rifles. We also have a medic to patch up wounded soldiers, as well as snipers with either a bolt-action or semi-automatic rifle with scopes for long-range shots, but they are more difficult to use at shorter ranges with their limited field of view. And then, last but not least, in the third platoon of the infantry company, you have the standard rifleman replaced with the more expensive assault class, which has anti-tank grenades that work well versus tanks as well as infantry, and for the Germans are equipped with the STG-44 assault rifle, and for the Russians with the BBSH-41 submachine gun. In both cases the assault class combines good firepower, only matched by the light machine guns with good mobility. As a result, the assault class is quite expensive. The German STG-44, firing an intermediate cartridge between pistol and full-sized rifle caliber, is a great mix in short-range full-auto firepower with still decent accuracy at medium ranges, though it can't beat the full rifle caliber weapons on long-range accuracy. The BBSH-41 submachine gun is pretty useless at anything but short range, but at short range it is extremely dangerous. It has a very high rate of fire, almost as high as the MG42, and comes with a 70-round drum magazine. It fires a comparatively weak cartridge though, which, while again reducing effective range, means despite its high rate of fire, remains controllable enough to keep your fire more or less where you want it at short ranges. The MP40, which you get on the German Company Commander and mortar troops, for example, in comparison fires with a much lower rate of fire, but in turn is extremely controllable. Both the MP40 and BBSH fire from an open bolt, like most submachine guns from this time, so they are not very accurate at anything but short range. But since they fire relatively weak pistol caliber rounds and are quite heavy compared with modern submachine guns, and in case of the MP40 the rate of fire is very low, they are quite controllable in full auto, making them very effective in, for example, urban environments. Well, that's a basic overview of the classes we currently have in the game. I don't know if there are more to come or if we will have more armament options later down the line. So, to give some feedback overall, so far I have fun playing this game, despite the fact that it is relatively early in development and there are certainly still bugs and unpolished elements to it. As mentioned, the netcode needs some more work, but has already seen large amount of improvement over the last few days. Gameplay-wise, one thing I noticed is that so far on all the maps that I have played, the objectives are always in at least somewhat built-up or semi-urban environments, which gives full automatic weapons a large advantage. Now that's to be expected, but with the maps being as large as they are, I would like to have at least some of the flags on the map to be in a more open terrain, with trenches and the like, or in woods, to give the bolt-action rifle some kind of advantage at least some of those objectives, just to mix things up a bit between the objectives. But overall I would say the game is going in the right direction, and if the developers keep this up, I certainly will keep playing the game. Maybe when I do more videos of it, I try to focus some more on the teamwork in it and show some more of the things like mortars, anti-tank guns and the like. If there's interest in that, let me know. Till then, I hope you enjoyed this little early look at Fog of War. Thanks for watching, and maybe I'll see you next time.